The polished marble lobby of Innovate Dynamics had heard many things. The confident click of expensive heels, the hushed whispers of multi-million-dollar deals, the polite murmur of ambition. But on a cold Tuesday night, it heard a sound it had never heard before. A raw, desperate scream from the man who was usually invisible. The man who spent his nights making the gleam on that very marble possible. "Don't get in the car!" The cry tore through the silent atrium, a sound of pure panic. Every head turned, including that of the formidable CEO, Cassandra Hale, just as she was about to step into her own chauffeured sedan. What she saw would set in motion a chain of events that would unravel secrets, test loyalties, and prove that sometimes the most important person in a company isn't the one in the corner office, but the one cleaning it. Victor Reyes was a creature of the night, a ghost in the machine of Innovate Dynamics. By the time the last of the ambitious programmers and sharp-suited executives clicked off their monitors and headed for the gleaming parking garage, his shift was just beginning. Armed with a squeaking cart of supplies, he navigated the vast empty canyons of cubicles and glass-walled offices, a silent custodian to a world he could only observe. He wasn't always a janitor. There was a time when Victor's hands, now calloused from pushing mops and wringing rags, held fine-tipped architectural pens. He dreamt in blueprints and saw futures in steel and glass. He and his wife, Anya, had a small but beautiful life planned out on graph paper, a life that crumbled with the diagnosis. Anya's fight was brave but brief, and the medical bills were a tidal wave that swept away their savings, their home, and finally Victor's career. Grief was a fog too thick to design through. All that was left was their daughter, Remy, and a desperate need to keep a roof over her head. Remy was 7 years old, a miniature sunbeam with her mother's bright eyes and Victor's quiet determination. She was the reason he pushed his cart through the silent halls each night. Every smudge he wiped from a window was for her. Every trash can he emptied was a small act of devotion. He was providing, just not in the way he had once imagined. Most nights Remy was with Mrs. Gable, a kindly old woman in their apartment building. But tonight, Mrs. Gable's sister had taken a fall, and Victor was left with no choice. He brought Remy to work. It was against the rules, a fact that hummed in his ears with a low-grade anxiety all evening. He made her a cozy nest of blankets in the janitor's closet on the 3rd floor, a small, windowless room that smelled of pine cleaner and industrial soap. She had her coloring book, a juice box, and a promise that he'd check on her every 30 minutes. "You be a little ghost, okay, sweet pea?" he whispered, tucking a stray piece of dark hair behind her ear. Quiet as a mouse. Remy nodded solemnly, her crayon hovering over a picture of a unicorn. "I'm the quietest ghost in the whole building, Daddy." Victor's heart ached with a familiar mix of love and failure. This wasn't the life he wanted for her, sleeping in a supply closet. But as he worked, the rhythmic slosh of his mop was a comfort. On the 40th floor, the executive suites, he worked with extra care. This was the realm of Cassandra Hale, the CEO. Victor had never spoken to her, but he felt like he knew her. He saw the remnants of her day, the half-empty cup of black coffee left on her desk, the faint scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air, the sheer imposing silence of an office where decisions that affected thousands of lives were made. He saw the framed photo on her massive mahogany desk. It was of her and a handsome, smiling man. Victor knew from the office gossip that this was her late husband, co-founder of the company, killed in a car crash 2 years ago. Sometimes, late at night, Victor would see the light in her office still on, a solitary beacon in the dark tower. He felt a strange, distant kinship with her. They were both ghosts of a sort, haunted by the lives they were supposed to have. He just polished the floors of her world. She commanded it. But he suspected the silence in her grand, empty house was no different from the silence in his small 2-room apartment. As his shift neared its end around 11 p.m., he packed up his cart. It was time to wake his little ghost and head home. He found Remy fast asleep, her cheeks smudged with purple crayon. He gently lifted her into his arms, her small body warm and heavy against his chest. He carried her down the service elevator, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence of the building. The main lobby was his last stop, a final sweep and polish before clocking out. He settled a sleeping Remy onto one of the plush leather couches, pulling his own worn jacket over her like a blanket before getting to work. Cassandra Hale ran on caffeine and grief. Since Robert's death, Innovate Dynamics was the only thing that made sense. It was the legacy he had started, the machine they had built together. Work was her armor, her purpose, her distraction. Late nights weren't an exception, they were the rule. Tonight she'd been wrestling with a hostile takeover bid from a rival firm, a corporate shark named Mitchell Davies in her own boardroom, nipping at her heels, and the ever-present weight of doing it all alone. Finally, at 11:15 p.m., she packed her briefcase. Her driver, a stoic man named George, would be waiting. As she descended in her private elevator, the silence of the building was a comfort. It was her kingdom, quiet and orderly. But as the elevator doors slid open to the grand lobby, the order was shattered. The first thing she saw was the janitor, the one with the sad eyes she sometimes noticed from a distance. He was on his knees, not cleaning, but frantically shaking a small child awake on one of the designer couches. Cassandra's brow furrowed. A child? Here? It was a flagrant security breach. Before she could process her annoyance, the heavy glass doors of the entrance hissed open. A man strode in, dressed a little too slickly for the late hour, a wide, insincere smile plastered on his face. He was handsome in a way that set Cassandra's teeth on edge. "There's my favorite niece," the man boomed, his voice echoing off the marble. Remy, now awake and rubbing her eyes, looked confused. "Uncle Gavin?" Victor shot to his feet, placing himself between the man, Gavin, and his daughter. His entire posture changed. The weary slump was gone, replaced by a rigid, defensive stance. "Gavin, what are you doing here? You can't be here." "Relax, Victor," Gavin said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture that didn't reach his shifty eyes. "I just wanted to see my niece. Your landlady told me you were working late. I thought I'd do you a favor, pick her up, let you finish your shift in peace. We'll go get some ice cream." "No," Victor's voice was low, tight. "We're leaving now. It's not a good time." "Come on, Remy Bug," Gavin cooed, ignoring Victor and taking a step closer. He pulled a small, brightly wrapped box from his pocket. "I got you something." Remy's eyes lit up, but she glanced at her father, sensing the tension. Victor's face was a mask of controlled panic. Cassandra, watching from the shadow of her elevator, felt her annoyance hardening into suspicion. This felt less like a family reunion and more like a confrontation. Her head of facilities, Brenda Carlisle, had complained about this specific janitor before. Something about him being morose and not a team player. Now he was conducting his sordid family drama in her lobby. "Gavin, I said no," Victor repeated, his voice gaining an edge. "You need to leave, now." "It's just ice cream, man. What's your problem?" Gavin's smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. He reached out and took Remy's hand. "Let's go, sweetie. Your dad's just tired." He started to lead a hesitant Remy toward the door, and that's when it happened. The carefully constructed dam of Victor's control broke. A primal fear, deep and terrifying, erupted from him. "Remy, no!" he roared. He lunged forward, grabbing Remy's other arm. The child let out a frightened yelp, caught between the two men. "Let go of her, Gavin." "You're making a scene, Victor," Gavin hissed, his grip tightening. He pulled Remy harder towards the exit, towards a dark sedan idling at the curb that Cassandra could now see through the glass. It was the sight of that car, the finality of that door, that sent Victor over the edge. He didn't see a CEO watching. He didn't see the pristine lobby. He only saw his daughter being pulled away into the night by a man he knew he couldn't trust. "Don't get in the car!" The scream was so raw, so filled with visceral terror, that it made Cassandra flinch. It wasn't a shout of anger. It was a plea of utter desperation. Victor yanked his daughter back with surprising strength, stumbling backward and pulling Remy into his chest. He held her tight, his body trembling, his eyes wild with fear as he glared at Gavin. The tableau held for a split second. The slick uncle, frozen in shock, the terrified father, clutching his daughter, and the bewildered little girl starting to cry. Into this silence, Cassandra Hale's cold, authoritative voice cut through the air like breaking glass. "Security!" Two guards, alerted by the shout, came running. Gavin, seeing them, immediately let go, his face paling. He shot Victor a look of pure venom before turning and disappearing out the doors, his car speeding away into the night. The lobby was suddenly silent again, save for Remy's quiet sobs and Victor's ragged breathing. He was still on the floor, holding his daughter, oblivious to the world. He was just a father who had almost lost his child. But Cassandra Hale didn't see a father. She saw an employee who had screamed in her lobby, a man who had brought a child to a secure corporate facility, and a massive, unforgivable liability. Her face was a mask of icy disapproval. The brief flicker of empathy she might have felt was extinguished by the cold calculus of corporate risk. This could not stand. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The security guards, Frank Henderson and a younger man, approached Victor cautiously. Frank, a kind-faced man who had shared a few late-night coffees with Victor, looked at him with concern. "Victor? You all right, man?" Victor could only nod, his throat too tight to speak. He was trying to soothe Remy, whispering apologies into her hair, his own heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was so consumed by the receding wave of adrenaline that he didn't notice Cassandra Hale approaching until her sharp, expensive shoes stopped a few feet from him. He looked up, and for the first time he met the CEO's eyes directly. They were the color of a winter sky, and just as cold. "My office, now," she commanded. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. She turned to the younger guard. "Get a description of that man and his vehicle. File a report." She then glanced at Frank. "Stay with the child." Victor's blood ran cold. He gently set Remy down on the couch, where Frank gave her a comforting, grandfatherly smile. "It's okay, sweet pea. Your daddy just has to talk to the big boss for a minute." Walking behind Cassandra Hale towards the private elevator felt like a walk to the gallows. The silence was deafening. When they entered her office on the 40th floor, the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. It was a view of power, a world away from Victor's life. Brenda Carlisle, the head of facilities, was already there, summoned by a terse text from Cassandra. Brenda was a woman who wielded her minor authority like a weapon. She had a perpetual frown and eyes that were always searching for infractions. She looked at Victor's janitor uniform with undisguised contempt. "Ms. Hale," Brenda began, her voice dripping with officious concern, "I am so sorry you had to witness such an unprofessional and, frankly, dangerous outburst. I can assure you this is not the standard we uphold." Cassandra didn't look at Brenda. She rounded her massive desk and sat, folding her hands. She looked at Victor, who stood twisting the hem of his worn work shirt. "Explain yourself, Mr. Reyes." Victor swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, ma'am, for the noise. I had to bring my daughter tonight. My sitter canceled. It won't happen again." "The child is the least of your problems right now," Cassandra said, her voice dangerously calm. "You assaulted a visitor in my lobby. You created a public disturbance that required security intervention. You terrified your own daughter. What do you have to say for yourself?" Brenda chimed in. "The man he accosted was family. I heard him call the little girl niece. This is some sort of domestic dispute he brought to the workplace. It's a clear violation of our code of conduct, not to mention a massive insurance liability." Victor felt a surge of indignation. "He's my wife's brother, Gavin. He's not stable. He has problems. With gambling. He's tried to take Remy before, saying I'm an unfit parent, trying to get at a small life insurance policy Anya left for her. I can't let him take her." The words tumbled out, clumsy and desperate. He knew how it sounded. A messy, pathetic life he'd dragged onto Cassandra Hale's pristine marble floor. Cassandra's expression didn't soften. She was a CEO. She dealt in facts, in data, in profit and loss. Victor's story was just that, a story. What she had was evidence. An employee screaming, a child endangered on her property, a potential for lawsuits from every direction. The man, Gavin, could claim he was assaulted. The child was in an unsafe environment. "So, you have an ongoing, volatile family issue," Cassandra stated, her voice cutting. "And you chose to bring that issue, and your child, into my company's headquarters. Your personal problems became a corporate security risk the moment you stepped through that door with her. I had no choice. Victor whispered, his shoulders slumping in defeat. There are always choices, Cassandra countered icily. Calling in sick is a choice. Finding another sitter is a choice. You made a poor one. Brenda? Brenda straightened up, a grimly triumphant look on her face. Mr. Reyes, given the severity of tonight's incident, your flagrant violation of company policy regarding visitors, and the clear security risk you pose, we are left with no option. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation which will almost certainly result in your termination. Please collect your personal belongings from the closet, and security will escort you from the premises. The words hit Victor like a physical blow. Termination. The one steady thing in his life, the meager paycheck that kept him and Remy afloat, was gone. Just like that. All because he had tried to protect his daughter. Please, he said, the word cracking with desperation. I need this job. It's all I have. It was a mistake. The mistake was made when you decided your personal life was more important than your professional responsibilities, Cassandra said, her tone final. She looked down at a file on her desk, a clear dismissal. The audience was over. Numbly, Victor turned and walked out of the office. Brenda followed, making sure he went straight to the service elevator. He collected his worn lunchbox and a framed photo of Anya and a baby Remy from the janitor's closet. Frank, the security guard, looked at him with pity in his eyes as he walked Victor and a now sleeping Remy to the door. I'm sorry, Victor, Frank said quietly. For what it's worth, I saw the look on that guy's face. You did what any dad would do. Victor couldn't answer. He just nodded, shifting Remy's weight in his arms. As he stepped out into the cold night air, the massive glass tower of Innovate Dynamics loomed behind him like a monument to his failure. He was invisible again, but this time, he was also unemployed. He looked down at his daughter's peaceful, sleeping face and felt a chasm of despair open up beneath him. He had protected her tonight, but what about tomorrow? Cassandra Hale remained in her office for a long time after Victor was escorted out. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was heavier, laced with the phantom echo of a father's desperate scream. She told herself she'd done the right thing, the only thing. A CEO couldn't make decisions based on emotion. The company, its shareholders, its thousands of other employees, depended on her to be rational, decisive, and to mitigate risk. Victor Reyes was a risk. End of story. She tried to return to the takeover proposal, but the stark black and white text blurred before her eyes. The face that kept appearing in her mind wasn't the smirking photo of her corporate rival. It was Victor's, the raw, unadulterated terror in his eyes. She was a widow. She knew what real fear felt like. She had felt it when the police officer stood on her doorstep, hat in his hands. She had felt it in the crushing silence of her home after the funeral. She knew the look of someone whose world was threatening to splinter into a million pieces, and she had seen that look on Victor Reyes. Brenda's smug report about handling the situation and Mitchell Davies's email praising her decisive action to protect the firm's integrity did nothing to soothe the disquiet in her gut. Mitchell's email, in particular, was cloying. Can't have unhinged elements disrupting the workplace, Cassandra. Sends the wrong message. Glad you cut out the cancer before it spread. Cancer. The word felt wrong. He hadn't seemed malicious. He'd seemed terrified. With a frustrated sigh, Cassandra pushed back from her desk. She walked to the great window overlooking the city. Robert had loved this view. He'd always said it reminded him that they weren't just building a company. They were part of a living, breathing ecosystem. Every one of those lights is a story, Cass, he used to say. Never forget that. Lately, she had forgotten. She'd seen the lights not as stories, but as data points, as markets, as competitors. She had seen Victor Reyes not as a man with a story, but as a liability. An idea, illogical and inefficient, began to form in her mind. It was a deviation from protocol, a waste of her valuable time, but it wouldn't let her go. She picked up her phone and dialed the head of security. Mark, it's Cassandra Hale. I need the complete, unedited security footage from the main lobby from 10:45 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. tonight. Audio as well. and I want it sent directly and only to my personal server. No one else is to see it, understood? Yes, Ms. Hale, right away. Next, she sent a discreet, encrypted message to the private investigation firm Innovate Dynamics kept on retainer for high-level corporate vetting. Subject: confidential HR inquiry. Utmost discretion required. Run a comprehensive but quiet background profile. Name: Victor Reyes. Approximate age 40. Last known employer: hours. I need everything. Financial history. Family status. Previous employment. Legal issues. Same for an associate, Gavin Monroe. I need the report by 9 a.m. tomorrow. This is a level 1 priority. She leaned back in her chair, a strange feeling washing over her. It was the same feeling she used to get with Robert when they were chasing a wild, improbable idea in the company's early days. A mix of uncertainty and profound curiosity. She was stepping off the well-lit path of corporate procedure and into the messy, complicated reality of a janitor's life. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she knew she had to look. The image of the little girl, crying and caught between two worlds, was seared into her memory. That little girl deserved more than a summary dismissal. For the first time in 2 years, Cassandra Hale wasn't just thinking like a CEO. She was thinking like a person again, and it felt terrifying. The next morning, Cassandra arrived at the office before sunrise. She ignored the stack of urgent files on her desk and the blinking light on her phone indicating a dozen voicemails. The 2 items she had requested were waiting for her in her secure inbox: the security footage and the preliminary report from the investigators. She clicked on the video file first. The cavernous lobby was empty, rendered in the ghostly black and white of the security camera. She watched as Victor tenderly carried his sleeping daughter and laid her on the couch. She saw him carefully drape his jacket over her before beginning his final cleaning duties. There was a gentleness in his movements, a quiet dignity that was invisible from 40 floors up. Then she watched the confrontation again, but this time it was different. Without the shock and the pressure of the moment, she could see the details she had missed. She saw the way Gavin Monroe's eyes darted towards the security cameras the moment he walked in. She saw the flash of anger in his face when Victor first refused him, a mask of joviality slipping for just a second. She turned up the audio. The digital hiss gave way to their voices, now clear and undeniable. "I just wanted to see my niece," Gavin's voice boomed, falsely cheerful. "You need to leave. Now!" Victor's voice was tight, strained, a man trying desperately to keep a lid on his panic. Cassandra listened to the whole exchange, to Gavin's wheedling promises of ice cream, to Victor's increasingly desperate refusals. She saw Remy's hesitation, the way the little girl looked to her father for a cue even as her uncle tried to pull her away. Then came the shout. Hearing it again, isolated and raw through the speakers, sent a chill down Cassandra's spine. It wasn't the sound of an aggressor. It was the sound of a cornered animal protecting its young. She minimized the video and opened the investigator's report. It was a PDF file, coolly factual, but it told a story more compelling than any novel. Subject: Reyes, Victor. Former profession: licensed architect, Reyes and Associates. Firm dissolved 2 years ago. Notes: highly regarded in his field. Several small but critically acclaimed sustainable design projects. Firm closed due to financial hardship following his wife's death. Spouse: Anya Reyes, née Monroe. Deceased: aggressive form of cancer. Medical bills exceeded $500,000 after insurance. Financials: savings depleted, house foreclosed. Currently holds 2 jobs: janitor at Innovate Dynamics, night shift, and stalker at a grocery store, weekends. No outstanding debt, but living paycheck to paycheck. No criminal record, clean driving record. The report painted a picture of a man utterly broken by fate, a man who had sacrificed his dreams and his career to survive for his daughter. Cassandra felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Then she scrolled down. Subject: Monroe, Gavin. Relation to subject: Reyes, brother of the late Anya Reyes. Financials: multiple outstanding debts. Known associate of local bookmakers. 2 judgments against him for unpaid loans. Recently evicted from his apartment. Legal: 1 restraining order filed against him by a former girlfriend. Two official complaints filed by Victor Reyes with Child Protective Services, alleging harassment and emotional distress to the child, Remy Reyes. Both cases were closed due to lack of physical evidence, citing it as a family matter. Notes: believed to be the sole beneficiary of a small trust that passes to Remy Reyes upon her 18th birthday, a fund set up by her maternal grandparents. Monroe has previously and unsuccessfully petitioned the court for guardianship. Cassandra stared at the screen, the words blurring together. It was all there. The motive, the history, the desperation. Victor wasn't unhinged. He was a father protecting his child from a predator who used family ties as a cloak for his own greed. The complaints to child services, closed and dismissed. The system had failed him. And then, last night, she had failed him too. She had stood in her ivory tower, wrapped in the armor of corporate policy, and passed judgment on a man who was fighting a war she couldn't even imagine. She hadn't seen a hero protecting his daughter. She'd seen an inconvenience. The shame hit her like a physical blow, sharp and sickening. The cold certainty of the previous night curdled into a profound, gut-wrenching guilt. Brenda's smug face flashed in her mind. Mitchell's cynical email, her own icy, dismissive words. There are always choices. What a cruel, ignorant thing to say to a man who had no good choices left. Robert's voice echoed in her memory. Every one of those lights is a story, Cass. Victor Reyes had a story of love, loss, and quiet, desperate courage. And she had almost written the final tragic chapter. Cassandra Hale stood up, her movements stiff. She knew what she had to do. It would be unprecedented. It would make her look foolish to her executive team. It would break every rule in the HR handbook. But it was the only thing to do. She wasn't just going to fix her mistake. She was going to try and make it right. She picked up her car keys. For the first time in a very long time, she wasn't going to have George drive her. This was a journey she had to make herself. The address from Victor Reyes's HR file led Cassandra Hale on a journey that felt more like crossing a border than driving across a city. The journey began in her own world, a pristine, silent enclave of manicured lawns, high stone walls, and houses that were more like private estates. Here the streets were wide and clean, and the only sounds were the distant hum of a leaf blower or the polite chime of a luxury vehicle's turn signal. As she drove her sleek black Audi, a car that normally felt like an extension of herself, she was acutely aware of its quiet, powerful purr, a sound that suddenly felt ostentatious and loud. With each passing mile, the landscape transformed. The sprawling estates gave way to tidy suburban developments, which then bled into the dense, gritty heart of the city. The wide, tree-lined avenues narrowed into streets shouldered by aging brick apartment buildings. The high-end boutiques were replaced by laundromats, check-cashing stores, and small, family-owned groceries with hand-painted signs in their windows. Cassandra saw mothers pushing strollers on cracked sidewalks and men in work boots waiting for a bus. It was a world teeming with a life and a struggle she typically only viewed from 40 floors up, abstracted into charts and demographic data. Today it was real, and she was an intruder in it. Her GPS announced she had arrived. She pulled her car to the curb in front of a 3-story walk-up, its brick facade weathered by decades of sun and rain. The building's railings showed flecks of peeling paint, and a child's bicycle lay on its side on the small patch of grass out front. She turned off the engine, and the sudden silence was filled by the sounds of the neighborhood. The distant wail of a siren, the rhythmic thump of music from an open window, the laughter of children playing down the block. For a full minute, she simply sat there, her hands gripping the leather steering wheel. What was she even doing? This was a breach of every conceivable corporate and personal boundary. Her lawyers would be horrified. Mitchell Davies would call it a sign of emotional instability. She rehearsed the words she'd prepared, but they sounded hollow and absurd in this context. On behalf of Innovate Dynamics, I'd like to formally retract our previous decision. It sounded like a press release. This required something else, something she hadn't needed to access in a very long time. Pure, unshielded humanity. Taking a deep, unsteadying breath, she stepped out of the car. the click of her expensive heels on the concrete sounding unnervingly loud. She found apartment 2B at the top of a narrow, dimly lit staircase that smelled faintly of garlic and old wood. She smoothed down her tailored silk blouse, a nervous gesture she hadn't made since her very first investor pitch. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm. It was, she realized with a strange sense of clarity, easier to face down a boardroom of hostile investors than to stand before this door. She raised her hand and knocked. The silence that followed was heavy. She could hear the faint sound of a television inside, and then it was cut off. Footsteps, slow and hesitant, shuffled toward the door. The deadbolt made a loud metallic clack, and the door opened a few inches, held fast by a security chain. Through the gap, Victor Reyes stared out at her. He looked a decade older than he had the night before. His face was pale and drawn, the skin under his eyes bruised with exhaustion. He was wearing a faded t-shirt with a small hole in the collar and gray sweatpants. His eyes, when they registered who was standing in his hallway, widened first in sheer disbelief, then narrowed with a weary, guarded suspicion. This was the woman who had shattered his world. Her presence here could only mean more trouble. "Ms. Hale?" His voice was a hoarse, bewildered whisper. "Mr. Reyes, Victor," she corrected herself, her own voice sounding thinner than she intended. "I know this is an intrusion. May I please come in for a moment? I promise I'm not here to cause any more problems." He didn't move, his body a silent barricade protecting his home. From behind his legs, Remy peeked out. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, and she had her thumb in her mouth, her eyes wide and curious as she took in the strange, fancy lady at the door. It was the sight of his daughter, of what this was all truly about, that seemed to finalize Cassandra's resolve. She met Victor's gaze directly, letting him see the undisguised regret in her own eyes. Slowly, as if moving against a powerful current, he seemed to relent. He closed the door just enough to slide the chain free, then opened it fully. "Come in," he said, his tone flat and devoid of welcome. The apartment was even smaller than she had imagined, but it was meticulously clean. It was one main room that served as a living and dining area, with a tiny kitchenette off to one side. The furniture was old and mismatched, but it was arranged with care. A worn armchair was draped with a soft, hand-knitted blanket. On a small, wobbly bookshelf, she saw the sight from the investigator's report made real. Architectural textbooks on concrete and steel structures were crammed next to a row of brightly colored children's books about dragons and brave princesses. The entire back wall was a gallery of Remy's artwork, crayon drawings of unicorns and suns with smiling faces, taped up with the precision of priceless art. It was a home stripped down to its barest essentials: work, survival, and a fierce, all-encompassing love for a child. I'm not sure why you're here, Ms. Hale," Victor said, not inviting her to sit. "If this is about my final paycheck, you can just mail it." "It's not about that," Cassandra said, choosing to remain standing. She felt she hadn't earned the right to sit at his table. "I'm here to apologize." Victor stared at her as if she had spoken in a language he didn't understand. He crossed his arms over his chest, a defensive posture. "Apologize for what? For firing me? You were within your rights. I broke the rules." "I broke a much bigger rule," Cassandra countered, her voice gaining strength. "I judged a situation without facts, without compassion, and without an ounce of humanity. I was wrong." She saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not forgiveness, but a crack in his defensive wall. She had to press on. "After you left, I couldn't let it go. I watched the full security footage. I also had a background check done. On your brother-in-law, and on you." The crack in his wall immediately sealed over, replaced by a cold fury. "You investigated me." The question was quiet, but it was laced with a profound sense of violation. "Yes," Cassandra admitted, forcing herself to hold his gaze. The shame was a physical heat on her face. It was an overreach, another intrusion, but I had to understand. I saw everything. Your old firm, the designs you created. I saw what happened with your wife, the medical bills, and I saw the official complaints you filed against Gavin, the ones that were ignored. Victor turned away from her then, looking toward the window that faced a brick wall. A muscle in his jaw twitched uncontrollably. He felt completely exposed, his entire tragic history laid bare for the cold assessment of the woman who held all the power. "So you know," he said, his voice thick with bitterness. "You know my whole pathetic story." "No," Cassandra said, the words sharp and immediate, surprising them both. She took a step closer. "That's not the story I saw. I saw the story of a brilliant architect who was knocked down by a tragedy no one should have to face. I saw the story of a man who sacrificed his dream to do the hardest and most important job in the world, raising his daughter alone. I saw a father who, when his child was threatened, roared like a lion. There is nothing pathetic about that, Victor. There is only honor in it." At that, the dam inside him finally broke. A strangled sob escaped his lips, a sound of years of grief, fear, and lonely struggle. He pressed the heels of his hands to his eyes, his broad shoulders shaking. Remy, seeing her father's distress, ran to him and wrapped her small arms around his legs, looking up at Cassandra with a worried frown. Cassandra's own eyes welled with tears. She had come here to fix a business mistake, but this was something far deeper. After a long moment, Victor composed himself, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I am so deeply, truly sorry for how I treated you," Cassandra said, her voice now soft but steady. "What I did was arrogant and unforgivable. Your job is waiting for you, if you'll have it. With full back pay, of course. We can ensure—" "No," Victor interrupted, shaking his head. Cassandra's heart sank. She had been prepared for this. "I understand completely. I wouldn't want to work for someone like me either." "You don't understand," Victor said, his voice raw but clear. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw not a janitor, not a victim, but the architect he used to be. "I can't go back to being a janitor, Ms. Hale. Not because of pride. It's because every time I would wipe down a desk or mop that marble floor, I would be reminded of my lowest point, of putting my daughter to sleep in a supply closet. It would be a reminder that I'm not the man I'm supposed to be for her." Cassandra nodded slowly, a profound understanding dawning on her. He was right. Reinstatement was just a bandage on a gaping wound. It wasn't a solution, it was a consolation prize. But she hadn't come here to offer a consolation prize. She had come here to right a wrong. "You're absolutely right," she said. "You shouldn't be a janitor. That's not the job I'm here to offer you." Victor looked at her, his brow furrowed in complete confusion. "Innovate Dynamics is breaking ground on a new R&D campus next year," she said, the idea that had formed in her office now a concrete plan. "It's the biggest project in our company's history. We have a prestigious architectural firm on contract, but we need an in-house project manager, someone on our side who understands design from the foundation to the rooftop, someone who can oversee the plans, manage the build, and ensure it's not just another glass box, but a functional, sustainable, human-centered space for our people to create the future." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I saw your old portfolio. Your work on the Greenleaf Community Center was groundbreaking. You have the talent, and after the last few years, I guarantee you have a more practical understanding of structural maintenance, workflow logistics, and facility operations than any 10 architects from that firm." Victor was utterly speechless, staring at her as if she'd just announced she could fly. You're offering me a job? As an architect? As a senior project manager in our facilities and design department," she clarified. "It's a senior position. The salary will reflect that. We'll pay for any license renewals and certifications you need. You won't be just an employee, Victor. You'll be helping me build the next stage of Robert's legacy." She glanced around the small, love-filled apartment, at the crayon drawings on the wall. "Your daughter deserves to see her father as the man he truly is, a builder." A single tear escaped Victor's eye and traced a path through the exhaustion on his face. It wasn't a tear of sadness or of gratitude, but of a hope so fierce and overwhelming it was almost painful. The hope that he could reclaim the man he thought was gone forever. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Say you'll think about it," Cassandra said, a small, genuine smile finally touching her lips. She pulled a business card from her purse and laid it on his small dining table. It looked impossibly crisp and white against the dark, worn wood. "My personal cell number is on the back. Call me." She turned to leave, pausing at the open door. "And Victor? One more thing. The company retains one of the best legal firms in the city. First thing tomorrow, they will be filing for a permanent, ironclad restraining order against Gavin Monroe on your behalf. He will never bother you or Remy again. That is my personal guarantee." And with that, she was gone. Victor stood frozen in the middle of his living room, the weight of the CEO's business card feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. He looked from the card to his daughter, who was now peeking out at him with a curious smile. The fog of 2 long years of grief and failure finally began to part, and through it, he could see the faint, beautiful, and utterly terrifying outline of a future. The news of Victor Reyes's return to Innovate Dynamics didn't just spread, it detonated. It began as a low murmur in the server rooms and a confused whisper in the marketing bullpens. An IT technician, heading to the basement for a pre-dawn system check, saw Victor not with a cleaning cart, but with a leather satchel heading for the main elevators. He saw the flash of a new, high-level security badge. By the time the morning coffee rush was in full swing, the rumor had mutated into a dozen different, unbelievable forms. The official email from Cassandra Hale landed in every inbox at 9 a.m. sharp, turning rumor into seismic fact. It was concise, professional, and utterly paradigm-shifting. "Please welcome Victor Reyes as the new Senior Project Manager for Campus Development." In the Facilities Management Office, Brenda Carlisle stared at her screen, her face a thunderous mask of indignation. She felt personally humiliated, her authority rendered meaningless. This wasn't just a hire, it was a public refutation of her judgment. Her world, built on the rigid application of rules and the clear delineation of hierarchy, had been turned upside down. The most significant explosion, however, occurred on the 40th floor. Mitchell Davies, the polished and ambitious VP, stormed into Cassandra's office, the email still glowing on his tablet. He didn't even wait for her assistant to clear him. "Cassandra, what in the world are you doing?" he demanded, his voice a low, controlled hiss. He prided himself on his composure, but this was a direct threat to the corporate order he thrived in. "Hiring a janitor for a senior management position? It's insanity. I've already had 3 calls from department heads asking if this is a prank." Cassandra looked up from her desk, her expression unreadable. "It's the soundest decision I've made all year, Mitchell. The board will crucify you. Our investors will think you've lost your mind," he pressed, stepping closer to her desk. "We cultivate an image of elite talent, of hiring the best and the brightest from the top universities. You've just handed a multi-hundred-million-dollar project to a man whose last job was emptying our trash cans. The optics are a disaster." "The optics," Cassandra replied, her voice dangerously quiet, "are a matter of perspective. You see a janitor, I see a licensed architect with a decade of experience who has spent the last 5 years learning every single flaw and inefficiency in our current infrastructure from the ground up. The elite firm we have on retainer quoted us a 7-figure fee just to identify problems Victor Reyes can list from memory." She stood up, walking around her desk to face him directly. "He's already proposed a revised schematic for the service infrastructure that will save us an estimated 15% on long-term energy costs. That's a figure the board will understand perfectly. Victor has integrity, a practical genius that no Ivy League degree can teach, and a personal stake in making this work. He's not just building a campus, he's rebuilding his life. That's a level of motivation I'll bet on any day of the week." "Now," she concluded, her eyes like steel, "is there anything else?" Mitchell stared at her, momentarily speechless. He saw a new resolve in Cassandra, a certitude that was no longer just about profit margins. It was something deeper, something he couldn't argue against. He gave a curt, frustrated shake of his head and left without another word. Victor's first day was a tightrope walk over a canyon of his own insecurities. As he walked through the gleaming marble lobby, the very spot where his life had fallen apart and been reborn, he felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. He wasn't in his familiar, worn work shirt, but in a new charcoal gray suit that felt like a costume. He half expected someone to stop him and ask him what he was doing. The imposter syndrome was a physical weight, pressing down on his shoulders. His new office on the 35th floor was a glass-walled space with a view that stretched to the horizon. On the wide, empty desk lay a set of rolled-up blueprints for the new campus. He walked over and untied the ribbon, spreading the heavy paper out. The smell of the ink, the crisp feel of the vellum. It was a scent from a past life. For a long moment, he simply stood there, tracing the lines with his fingertips, the ghost of an architect awakening within him. He spent that first week proving Cassandra right. He started not with the blueprints, but with the people. He sought out Frank, the kind security guard. Frank's face broke into a wide, proud grin when he saw Victor. "Knew you had it in you, son," he said, clapping him on the back. "Knew it the whole time." Victor spent an hour with him, asking about security blind spots and access point logistics. He then met with the entire night crew, the men and women he used to work alongside. He didn't hold a meeting in a boardroom. He met them in their break room with coffee and donuts, asking them about everything from persistent plumbing issues to the durability of the flooring. They spoke to him with a candor they would never offer a suit-clad executive, giving him a treasure trove of invaluable, practical data. His true partnership, however, was with Cassandra. They began a ritual of weekly lunches, not in the hushed, exclusive executive dining room, but in the bustling main cafeteria. It was a deliberate choice by Cassandra, a clear signal to the entire company. Their conversations were an unlikely blend of the personal and the professional. He'd tell her a story about Anya's love for native wildflowers, which sparked the idea for a low-water, sustainable landscaping plan for the campus. She, in turn, found herself confiding in him about the relentless pressure of the takeover bid, a vulnerability she showed no one else. They were two people who had known profound loss, and in each other they found a quiet, powerful ally. Slowly, miraculously, the culture of Innovate Dynamics began to shift. The story of the janitor and the CEO became a quiet legend, a testament to the company's new, unwritten ethos. People started to see each other differently. Programmers learned the names of the people who cleaned their offices. Managers held doors open for maintenance staff. The invisible population of the building was finally seen, their value finally understood. 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of planning, revisions, and hard work. The day of the groundbreaking ceremony for the new R&D campus was bright and clear. A large white tent had been erected on a hill overlooking the vast empty field. Board members, local dignitaries, and hundreds of employees milled about, sipping coffee and making small talk. Victor stood near the podium, his suit feeling less like a costume and more like his own skin. Beside him, holding his hand tightly, was Remy. She was wearing a new dress, and her eyes were wide with the excitement of the day. No longer the frightened child in a supply closet, but a radiant little girl watching her father take his place in the world. When Cassandra took the stage to speak, a hush fell over the crowd. She spoke of the future, of innovation, of the company's commitment to growth. But then she paused and looked directly at Victor. "Buildings are more than just steel and glass," she said, her voice carrying across the field. "They are containers for human potential. Our new campus represents the future of this company, and its design has been shaped by a man who understands our foundation better than anyone. Someone who has seen this company from every possible angle." Later, as the speeches ended and a ceremonial bulldozer took the first symbolic scoop of earth, Victor and Cassandra stood together, watching the beginning of their shared project. The noise of the machinery and the applause of the crowd faded into a distant hum. "Thank you," Victor said, his voice thick with an emotion too vast for words, "for seeing me." Cassandra turned to him, a genuine, warm smile on her face, a smile he now knew well. She looked from his grateful eyes to the field, the blank canvas where a new future would rise. "Thank you, Victor," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet strength, "for reminding me what we're really here to build." The story of Victor Reyes and Cassandra Hale is a powerful reminder that behind every job title, every uniform, there is a human being with a story, a struggle, and a hidden potential. It shows us that true leadership isn't about making the easy, calculated decision, but about having the courage to look deeper, to listen, and to choose empathy over policy. A single moment of understanding can change a life, and a single act of compassion can transform an entire company culture. What started with a father's desperate scream in a lobby ended with a new foundation being laid, not just for a building, but for a better, more human way of doing business. What did you think of Cassandra's shocking decision? Was it professional, or was it the only human thing she could do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that inspire and move you. Thank you for listening.